Federal authorities are targeting a violent international gang operating here in Southern California. Fox 11's Gigi Graciette was embedded with authorities as they launched today's raids.
From El Monte to India and points in between, Operation Hardball kicked off at dark 30 today, with federal agents simultaneously arresting almost 24 people accused of working with 3 competing transnational crime rings operated mainly out of India.
The 3 indictments target 3 separate criminal gangs, including high-level leaders who directed, from abroad, violence and drug trafficking in the United States.
A total of 37 were actually indicted, including 2 of the masterminds, which the Department of Justice says are already in prison back in India, but that hasn't stopped them.
The indictment spells out how, among other things, this gang would partner with corrupt law enforcement officials in India to falsely accuse enemies of crimes within India. A police chief in India charged with attempting to extort victims here in Los Angeles by threatening to file a false murder charge against them in India.
From the shot callers to the lower-level associates, like 26-year-old Justin Guzman, arrested today at the El Monte Metro Station, where the FBI says he had just started a job. But according to the Department of Justice, back in 2023, Guzman was working with one of the Indian crime rings and was in possession of about 9 kilos of cocaine they claim he was going to sell for the group. The crime syndicates accused not only of the drug dealing, but even the assassination in Canada of a prominent Indian political and religious figure.
The gang used this assassination and other high-profile acts of violence to terrorize Sikh and other Indian communities, and they used acts of violence to legitimize and bolster widespread extortion schemes.
Other charges include racketeering, targeted killings, human trafficking, shootings, and extortion. At least 7 arrests were made in the Los Angeles area alone as agents fanned out serving search warrants, going from home to home associated with those arrested. At least 2 locations were searched in Los Angeles in connection to Guzman's arrested, with the Department of Justice saying they actually worked with law enforcement agencies in Spain, Mexico, India, and across the United States, following the criminal organization's money and suspects. In Highland Park, Gigi Graciette.